Let's bring in MS Now national security analyst, former White House National Security Communications Advisor, Rear Admiral John Kirby. Admiral, it's good to see you this morning. I want to begin, though, with your reaction, your reflection on the deaths of these service members, and if you think that these losses are going to change any of the calculus for President Trump right now. One of them is just 19 years old. 19. I keep thinking about her and her family.
Yeah, very, very young here. I don't know that it's going to change much in terms of the calculus in terms of President Trump's thinking militarily on this, but it is a huge loss and a sacrifice. And I think it's important that we remember that there's a couple of families out there, actually three now, that just got the worst possible news you can get. And they're grieving and they're suffering. And I hope that Mr. Trump and his administration and the Pentagon are wrapping their arms around those families, because they're going to need a lot of support going forward.
Well, speaking of the sort of messaging that we're getting from the White House, from the Pentagon on this, the New York Times has been reporting that the Pentagon failed to disclose dozens of injuries sustained by service members throughout the course of this war. And Central Command is not required to release information, but you know, the American public has been angry about this war. People want transparency. They, of course, want it to come to an end. And while there may be an argument to be made here that you don't want your enemy to know the sort of full extent of the damage that they've done at these different bases in the region, does the American public deserve to know more about what has happened to our service members and what we've essentially done to ourselves in the course of this war with Iran?
Unequivocally, yes, Antonia. The American people deserve to know a lot more about how this war got started and how it's been prosecuted. And the administration has not done, in my view, a sufficient job of communicating exactly what we're trying to achieve and how we're going to achieve it and how we're going to know when we have achieved it. There's been scant few Pentagon briefings. I think the last one was in May. There's been very little dialogue or discourse with members on Capitol Hill, and certainly almost none with our allies. So I think there's an awful lot more that needs to be done on the communication front so that the American people can at least take some measure of confidence that there's a plan here and there's a strategy. Now, the thing that worries me, and I think worries a lot of Americans, is that maybe there isn't a strategy. Maybe there isn't a plan. I mean, it does seem like that we're kind of whipsawing here between truce and talks of negotiations and then back to escalatory strikes again. So it's difficult for anybody to make sense of it.
Well, on that front, I want you to take a listen to the president and some of the ways in which he has spelled out the alleged timeline for this war.
I would say that within 2 weeks, maybe 3. We are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. I thought it would take 4 to 6 weeks, and I was right.
Now we're just ending it. So it's really not the same thing. What we're doing now is we're ending any chance where they can have a nuclear missile. If you look at it, after a week and a half, not 4 weeks, a week and a half, 2 weeks, we stopped them from probably, but I don't want to have the word probably. Thank you very much.
Was there a kernel of truth in any of that? I mean, the last remarks that the viewers just saw there are from Sunday. Him saying, now we're just ending it. This does not look like an ending.
No, it certainly doesn't. Look, the enemy gets a vote. President Eisenhower, when he was a general, I think, said it best that no plan survives first contact with the enemy. The enemy gets a vote. And the Iranians have certainly had their ability to affect military operations and continue to do so, even as just yesterday hitting ships in the Strait of Hormuz. So this shows this is a demonstration of the complexity of warfare and the law of unintended consequences. And you can't perfectly predict, no matter how precise your weapons are. And even if you do have a strong strategy, and there's no indication, at least that I see, that they do, there's no you can't take perfect comfort in knowing that it's going to exactly play out the way that you want it to. And I think that's what we're seeing here. The Iranians have proven incredibly resilient, able to withstand a lot of military pressure and still be able to affect the region's security with these drones and missiles. So there's no indication now that we're on an off-ramp to the military operations. As a matter of fact, I'd go so far as to say that we're seeing an escalation and a real potential here that we're at an inflection point for a return to all-out war between the two sides.
And, you know, Admiral, it's not even just that the Iranians have been resilient and able to withstand more than some in the U.S. maybe thought that they could, but they were also able during this period of the ceasefire, when the shaky MOU was in place, they were able to bring in billions of dollars of new cash because they took advantage of that time, capitalized on it, and sent out billions of barrels of oil. And so they now have new money.
They do. They certainly have the ability to continue to fund now their military and to try to build up their resources. That said, and look, I think the Trump administration factored that into the truce, that there was going to be, you know, when they open up the strait like that and try to ease tensions, that they were going to try to profit off it. I think that was well known going into it. That is why, however, you're starting to see in these new strikes, Antonio, that they're hitting more military infrastructure than they were before, even secondary infrastructure, bridges, railways, that kinds of thing, because they knew that the Iranians were going to use this truce to rebuild and to reconstitute. Now they're trying to take those capabilities away from them. Obviously, the Iranians still have a lot of capability left. They're not firing off the massive volumes of drones and missiles that they were before, but they are still targeting with some precision targets well outside just the Iranian region and the Strait of Hormuz. They still have that military capability left to them.
Admiral, my last question for you quickly is, to what extent you think that this entire story, this war, has diminished our image, our standing on the global stage? I wonder how other adversaries like China and Russia view us after seeing what the Iranians have been able to do to us.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. You know, who's really losing and who's really winning? And I think it's important to look at some of the winners and some of the how people are perceiving America and Iran losing, because both sides are really losing here. The Chinese are welcoming the fact that we're now mired down in another conflict in the Middle East and not so much focused on the Indo-Pacific. As a matter of fact, some of the interceptors and missiles that we've taken to conduct the war in the Middle East have come from the Indo-Pacific at the expense of our defenses there. The Russians, too, have benefited, not just from seeing the United States embroiled in another conflict in the Middle East, but also from the rising price of oil that they're profiting off. Putin's profiting off to help fund his war in Ukraine. But the biggest thing that concerns me is the lack of consultation with the allies and the fact that so many of our allies, our strong European and even in the Indo-Pacific allies, are not with us on this war. They weren't consulted. There was no coordination done with them. They, too, are suffering economically from the results of this Iran war, and yet they're not getting involved. And all that could have been, I think, avoided if we just had decided not to take this step, you know, in the beginning, back in February, if it had been a more considered strategy put forward with clear goals and that, you know, there was some consultation and coordination done.
Admiral John Kirby, thank you so much for your time this morning.